Long ago, in the land of Canaan, there lived a man named Jacob, a father, a shepherd, a man who had wrestled with an angel and carried the weight of God's promises on his shoulders. He had 12 sons, born of different mothers, bound together by blood, but never quite by love. And among them, one stood apart in his father's heart. His name was Joseph, son of his old age, child of his beloved Rachel. Jacob could not stop watching him across the fire at night. And love, when it plays favorites, rarely stays hidden. Jacob wove him a robe like no other, colors bleeding into each other like a sunset stitched in cloth. To Jacob it was affection made visible. To his other sons, watching Joseph wear it through the camp, it was a verdict. You were never enough. He is the one. Then Joseph began to dream. And worse, he began to speak his dreams out loud. We were binding sheaves in the field, he told his brothers, eyes bright, too young to feel the danger, in his own words. My sheaf stood up, and yours bowed down to it. Silence, the kind of silence that has teeth. Days later he dreamed again. The sun, the moon, 11 stars bowing before him like servants before a king. Even Jacob, hearing it, felt something cold move through his chest. He said nothing, but he did not forget. Hatred does not arrive all at once. It gathers, a glance withheld here, a word swallowed there, until one day the brothers found they could not look at Joseph without their hands curling into fists. He was the dreamer, the favorite, the one who wore their father's love like armor and spoke of a future where they knelt at his feet. There is no rage quite like the rage of a man told again and again that he is less. One morning, Jacob sent Joseph out. Your brothers are with the flock near Shechem, he said. Go, see that all is well. Joseph went, as he always did, obedient, unknowing, mile after mile through the dust toward Dothan, walking straight into the hands of the men who hated him most. They saw him long before he reached them, a smear of color against the pale hills. The robe gave him away before his face did. Here he comes, one spat. The dreamer. And then, almost too easily, the words that should never be spoken between brothers. Let's kill him. Throw him to the pit and tell the old man a wild animal tore him apart. Then let's see what becomes of his precious dreams. No one flinched at the suggestion. That was the terrible part. It felt in that moment almost reasonable. Only Reuben hesitated. Something in him, conscience or fear of what could never be undone, pulled back from blood. Don't kill him, he said. Throw him in the pit, just the pit. He meant to come back later, alone, and pull his brother out into the light. But he did not say that part aloud. So when Joseph arrived, breathless, still calling their names, they fell on him at once. Hands tore the robe from his shoulders, the beautiful robe, the hated robe, and threw him down into the dry black mouth of an empty cistern. Above him the sky narrowed to a circle of light. Below, only stone and silence. And while their brother's voice rose from the pit, pleading, the sons of Jacob sat down in the dirt and ate their bread, as if a cry from beneath the earth were nothing at all. As the brothers ate, dust rose on the horizon, a caravan of traders, camels loaded with spices and myrrh, winding its way toward Egypt. And it was Judah who spoke first, not out of mercy, but out of calculation. What do we gain by killing our brother and covering up his blood? Let's sell him instead. He is, after all, our own flesh. The others listened. Killing left a stain no water could wash away. Selling felt almost clean. So they pulled Joseph up from the pit, his robe gone, his voice hoarse from crying out into stone walls that never answered. He begged, he wept. He looked into the faces of brothers he had grown up beside, hoping to find even one flicker of mercy. He found none. For 20 pieces of silver they handed him over to strangers and watched as the caravan swallowed him into the distance, toward a land whose language he did not know, toward a life he never chose. Then came the harder work, the lie. They took Joseph's robe, dipped it in the blood of a slaughtered goat, and carried it home to their father. "We found this," they said, laying it before him. "Look closely. Is it your son's robe or not?" Jacob's hands trembled as he touched the fabric, the same colors he had woven with his own fingers, now dark and stiffened with blood. He did not need an answer. His body already knew. "A wild animal has torn him apart," he cried. "Joseph is dead." He tore his clothes. He wrapped himself in sackcloth and he wept for his son, not for a day, not for a week, but for what felt like the rest of his life. His other children came to comfort him one by one, and one by one he turned them away. "No," he said, "I will go to my grave mourning my son." He did not know that his son was not dead. He only knew that the light of his household had gone out. Meanwhile, far from everything he had known, Joseph arrived in Egypt in chains. He was sold again, this time to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the palace guard. A slave with no name that mattered, no family, no robe, nothing but the clothes given to him and the God his father had once served. But something in Joseph refused to break. Whatever bitterness might have taken root in another man's heart, in Joseph it did not. He worked. He served. And slowly Potiphar began to notice. This slave was different. Whatever he touched seemed to prosper. Whatever task he was given, he carried out with a quiet excellence that could not be ignored. So Potiphar raised him up. He placed Joseph over his entire household, trusted him with everything he owned, and gave no thought to anything except the food he ate. The boy who had once been thrown into a pit by his own brothers now stood as the most trusted man in an Egyptian officer's house. It seemed for a moment that his suffering had turned towards something like grace. He could not have known that the hardest part of his story had not yet begun. Joseph had grown into a young man, strong, capable, and, though he carried no title beyond slave, undeniably handsome in a way that drew attention he never sought. And in Potiphar's house, someone was watching him. Potiphar's wife. Day after day she pressed him. "Come to bed with me," she said again and again, until her words became something he could not walk past without hearing. But Joseph refused. Not once, not carelessly, but with the full weight of everything he believed. "My master trusts me with everything in this house," he told her. "He has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How could I do this great evil and sin against God?" It was not fear of Potiphar that stopped him. It was something deeper, a loyalty to a God he could not see, in a land where no one would have blamed him for giving in. But she did not stop, and one day, when the house stood empty of servants, she caught him by his cloak. "Come to bed with me," she said one final time. Joseph tore himself away, leaving the cloak in her hand, and ran, out of the room, out of the house, away from the one thing that could destroy everything he had built. She sat alone, holding the cloak, and something in her twisted from desire into fury. When the servants returned, she screamed. When her husband came home, she wept. "The slave you brought into this house," she said. "He tried to force himself on me. I screamed and he ran, leaving his cloak behind." The cloth in her hands became the only evidence anyone needed. No one asked Joseph to explain. No one remembered his years of faithful service. A slave's word meant nothing against his master's wife. Potiphar's fury was immediate. Joseph, the young man who had refused sin, who had guarded his master's house and his master's trust with everything in him, was seized and thrown into prison. Not for the crime he committed, but for the one he refused to commit. He had done everything right, and it had cost him everything anyway. The prison was dark and cold, and built for men the world had forgotten. Joseph sat within its walls, stripped once again of everything: a robe, a household, a name that meant something. This was the second time his life had been torn away from him by people who should have protected him. And yet something in Joseph did not turn to bitterness. Whatever God he prayed to in the dark of that cell had not abandoned him, even here, even now. And slowly, the same quiet excellence that had marked him in Potiphar's house began to mark him again, even in chains. The warden noticed, and little by little, Joseph was given charge over the other prisoners, trusted, even here in the lowest place a man could fall. He did not know that 2 men were about to arrive in that same prison, carrying dreams that would change the course of his entire life. Sometime later, 2 new prisoners were brought into the same dark halls, Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker, both fallen from favor, both awaiting a fate they could not guess. Joseph was assigned to attend them, and one morning he found their faces heavy with more than the weight of prison walls. "Why do you look so troubled today?" he asked. "We each had a dream last night," they told him, "and there is no one here to explain what it means." Joseph answered simply, "Interpretations belong to God. Tell me what you saw." The cupbearer spoke first. A vine with 3 branches, budding, blossoming, bearing grapes he pressed into Pharaoh's cup and placed into Pharaoh's hand. Joseph listened, and something in him recognized the shape of the answer before the man finished speaking. "The 3 branches are 3 days, he said. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position. You will place his cup in his hand again, just as before." Then he added quietly, almost as if it cost him something to ask, "When it goes well for you, remember me. Mention me to Pharaoh. Get me out of this place. I was stolen from my homeland, and I have done nothing to deserve this prison." The baker, hearing a good omen in the first dream, offered his own. 3 baskets of bread on his head, birds picking the top basket clean. Joseph's face did not soften this time. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and hang your body on a tree where the birds will eat your flesh." 3 days later, both dreams came true exactly as Joseph had said. The cupbearer was restored to Pharaoh's table. The baker was executed, and the cupbearer, safe again in his old life, walked away from the prison and did not think of Joseph again. Not for a single day, not for 2 full years. For 2 years, Joseph remained in that cell, forgotten by the one man who could have spoken his name to power. 2 years of watching the light shift across stone walls, 2 years of a promise unfulfilled, 2 years of wondering if God, too, had forgotten him the way the cupbearer had. Then, one night, Pharaoh himself began to dream. 7 fat cows rising from the Nile, grazing peacefully until 7 gaunt, starving cows rose after them and devoured them whole, yet remained as thin as before. He woke, shaken, and slept again, and dreamed a second time of 7 healthy heads of grain, swallowed by 7 withered ones. In the morning, Pharaoh summoned every magician, every wise man in Egypt. None could tell him what the dreams meant. And in that moment of Pharaoh's desperation, something stirred in the cupbearer's memory. "I remember my faults today," he said slowly. "There was a young Hebrew in the prison, a slave who interpreted a dream for me once, and it happened exactly as he said. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph. They rushed him from the dungeon, shaved him, changed his clothes, and brought him, still a prisoner in every sense but this one moment, before the most powerful man in the world. 'I hear you can interpret dreams,' Pharaoh said. Joseph did not claim the gift as his own. 'I cannot do it,' he answered, 'but God will give Pharaoh the answer he needs.' Pharaoh told him everything, the fat cows and the gaunt ones, the healthy grain and the withered. And Joseph, standing in chains of circumstance, if not of iron, spoke with a clarity that silenced the room. Both dreams mean the same thing. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming to all the land of Egypt, but after them 7 years of famine will follow, a famine so severe it will consume all memory of the abundance before it. He did not stop there. Let Pharaoh find a discerning man and set him over the land to store up grain during the 7 good years, so that Egypt will not perish when the famine comes. Pharaoh looked at the man before him, a foreigner, a former slave, a prisoner pulled from a cell that same morning, and saw something no one else in his court possessed. "Can we find anyone else like this?" he asked his officials, "one in whom the Spirit of God dwells?" Then, turning to Joseph, he said the words that would undo everything the pit and the prison had tried to bury. "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." He placed his own signet ring on Joseph's hand, dressed him in robes of fine linen, and hung a gold chain around his neck. The boy, who had been thrown into a pit by his own brothers, now rode in a chariot second only to Pharaoh's, while men bowed before him in the streets. He was 30 years old. 13 years had passed since the day his brothers sold him. 13 years of slavery, false accusation, and forgotten promises, and in a single day, all of it turned toward a purpose he could not yet fully see. The 7 years of abundance came exactly as Joseph had said, and Egypt overflowed with grain, so much that Joseph stopped keeping count, storing it in the cities like sand upon the shore. Then the famine came, just as heavy as the abundance had been generous, spreading beyond Egypt's borders into every land around it, including Canaan, including the tents of an old man named Jacob, who did not know that the son he still mourned was the very man now deciding who would eat and who would starve. Word reached Jacob that grain could be found in Egypt, and he sent 10 of his sons to buy what they could, keeping only the youngest, Benjamin, close beside him, the last living son of his beloved Rachel and the only piece of her he had left. The 10 brothers made the long journey down into Egypt and were brought before the very man who controlled the grain of the entire nation. They bowed before him, faces to the ground exactly as Joseph had dreamed decades before. They did not recognize him. How could they? The boy in the pit had become an Egyptian lord, speaking through an interpreter dressed in linen and gold. But Joseph recognized them instantly. Every face, every voice, every wound they had given him 20 years before, standing now with their foreheads pressed into the dust before his feet. He did not reveal himself. Not yet. Instead, he spoke to them harshly through the interpreter, accusing them of being spies sent to scout the weaknesses of Egypt. They protested, desperate, explaining who they were, 12 brothers, 1 dead, 1 remaining home with their father. Joseph listened to every word, feeling something rise in his chest that he could not yet name. Not quite anger, not quite grief, something older than both. He seized Simeon and held him as a prisoner, sending the others home with grain and with a demand that cut deep into an old man's fear. "Return and bring your youngest brother with you, or you will not see my face again." Jacob refused at first. He had already lost 1 son to what he believed was a wild animal, and he would not risk losing Benjamin the same way. But the famine did not relent, and eventually, with grain running low and no other choice remaining, Jacob let Benjamin go. The brothers returned to Egypt, this time all 11 together, and were brought once more before the man who held their lives in his hands. Joseph looked at Benjamin for the first time in over 20 years, his own mother's son, the only brother who shared his blood as well as his grief, and something inside him nearly broke there in front of them all. He excused himself quickly, found a private room, and wept where no one could see. Then he washed his face, composed himself, and returned to test them one final time. He ordered his silver cup hidden in Benjamin's sack of grain, and as the brothers set out for home, he sent his men after them, accusing them of theft. The cup was found exactly where it had been placed, and the brothers tore their clothes in horror, certain their father's worst fear was about to come true a second time. They returned to Joseph together, all of them, and it was Judah, the same Judah who once suggested selling Joseph for silver, who stepped forward now and offered himself in Benjamin's place. "Let me remain as your slave instead of the boy," he begged. "How can I return to my father if the boy is not with me? I could not bear to see the anguish that would come upon him." He spoke of Jacob's love for Benjamin, of the fear that losing him would kill the old man outright, of a father's heart that had already broken once and could not survive breaking again. And Joseph, hearing his own father's grief described in Judah's trembling voice, could not hold himself together any longer. Joseph ordered every Egyptian servant out of the room until only he and his brothers remained. And then he wept, loudly enough that the sound carried through the walls, loudly enough that all of Pharaoh's house heard it. Through his tears he spoke the words his brothers had waited 20 years, without knowing it, to hear. "I'm Joseph. Is my father still alive?" The brothers could not answer. They stood frozen, unable to reconcile the powerful Egyptian lord before them with the boy they had thrown into a pit and sold for silver. Fear gripped them. Surely now, with all his power, he would take his revenge. But Joseph stepped closer, and his voice, when it came again, held no anger at all. "Come closer to me," he said gently. "I am Joseph, your brother, the one you sold into Egypt. But don't be afraid and don't be angry with yourselves. God sent me ahead of you to preserve life. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to save many lives as it is being done today." He fell on Benjamin's neck and wept, and then he kissed each of his brothers in turn, weeping over every one of them, and only then could they finally speak to him without fear. Pharaoh himself, hearing that Joseph's brothers had come, rejoiced and commanded that Jacob's entire household be brought to Egypt, given the best of the land, spared from the famine still tightening its grip on Canaan. So the brothers returned home, carrying a truth almost too great to say aloud. "Joseph is still alive," they told their father. "He is ruler over all the land of Egypt." Jacob's heart went numb at first, unable to believe it, until he saw the wagons Joseph had sent, and something long buried in him stirred back to life. "It is enough," the old man said. "My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." And so the family that had once been shattered by jealousy, a pit and a lie soaked in blood, was carried down into Egypt whole. Jacob embraced the son he had mourned for over 20 years, weeping against the shoulder of the boy he never stopped believing was dead. And Joseph, the dreamer, the slave, the prisoner, the ruler, looked at the brothers who had once left him for dead in the dust and chose forgiveness over vengeance, mercy over what they deserved. What they had meant for evil, God had turned toward good, not despite the pit, not despite the prison, not despite the years of silence, but through every single one of them. The story of Joseph was not a story of a man who avoided suffering. It was the story of a man who walked through all of it and came out on the other side able to forgive the very people who had put him there. Could you have trusted God the way Joseph did? In the pit? In the prison? Waiting years for a promise that seemed forgotten? Could you have forgiven the way he forgave? Tell us in the comments.